What's going on, y'all? Jordan, another episode of Lightning Latest. Can't wait to dive in with you guys. We teased a few topics over the last few days, one of which is the long-term viability of Vasi, right? Um, he's under contract for 3 more years. 31 years old already, though. Already making $9 million a year. So when he's done, he'll be around 34. So the question will be this: how will he look in those 3 years? He came back from that serious injury he sustained, cut him out. Look at a chunk of last season, came back, played played pretty good. You know, it was just we don't know if he's gonna be here after 3 years from now. If he does sign, how long, how much money? We know that the cap is rising, and that's great, and it should give us a pretty good amount of leeway to see, if we can sign him long term. But even still, let's say he plays until he's 40. That's another 9, 10 years, and that question is really not moot. I mean, it's really moot for now, at least. But just a little worrisome to think about because he could be gone in 3 years. So if he does leave in 3 years, who would it be? Would it be, Hugo Anfeld? He had a rough, last couple of years, and then he went to Sweden, went back home to Sweden last year. He's only 23. Maybe could be him. Will it be a free agent edition sometime in the future? Maybe after Vasi leaves, if he leaves in 3 years, or, let's say he plays for another 5 or 6 years and then he retires, and, there's still a lot of things he could do. He could also, end up going back home to Russia and playing a couple of years before he retires, or he retires here, let's say at like 38. Tons of possibilities still. What about Caleb Hale or Harrison Mangan? They're two recent picks of Three Boys. I'm not sure. It's gonna be interesting to see, because if Vasi maintains his level of play we've seen for pretty much his entire career, it's why not keep him, right? Why not keep him for another 3, 4 years after his contract ends, maybe even longer? If he's still playing well, and we don't really have like a true, guy coming out through the system that can replace him, why not re-sign him? So it's definitely an interesting thing to consider, and it's something we will can look at, within the next few weeks as well, because I'm interested. I'm gonna be looking more into it. I'm interested to see what other analysts are taking about this. So we're gonna dive in the next few weeks about it further. But we're gonna transition to a recent re-signing. It's our boy Yanni, right? We love Yanni. So it's 6 years, it's probably gonna keep him until he retires. He's 34 right now, 6-year deal, so it'll be around 40 when he's done. 2.3 million AAV, so that's not bad at all. He's the third line center right now. As he ages, will probably slide down to that fourth line role. But there's nothing wrong with that because, Coop knows what he has in Yanni. Bree Boy knows what they have in Yanni. It's just, a very smart re-signing by the team. Furthermore, by spreading it out, it allows him to retire here. He never wanted to leave. But, the Kraken took him in the expansion draft, so he was there for a couple of years. Thankfully, they traded him back. So I'm interested to see now what he's going to do now that he's coming off, shorter year that was kind of injury plagued. But, if we get him back to full health, he continues to play that solid third line role, it's going to be great. Combining him with, the young players we talked about the last few days, like Pelletier and Goncalves, it's going to help with their development. And, if anything, that's, baseline, that's all he can do, that's all right. But I think Yanni's still got quite a bit of fight left in him. Really excited to see how he transitions moving forward as he ages, because his game has already been, he's very savvy, very high hockey IQ. He's just a good all-around player. So should be a lot of fun to see how he plays as he gets older and what he's going to bring to the Bolts. And hopefully he does end up retiring here, because we love the guy, right? But we are getting closer and closer to preseason. We're almost there, guys. We're going to play the Carolina Hurricanes for a couple games. They finished second in the Metro last year with 99 points. They lost to the Panthers again. an Eastern Conference Finals in 5 games. Um, you know, deep offensive club. The owner, Tom Dundon's, really, entrusted his hockey operations staff to build an offensive juggernaut, and they have. And they, Nicolas Ehlers is there, Sebastian Aho. There's so many different kind of scoring threats in which Brendan Moore, their coach, could use. So it's going to be fun to see how we play them in the preseason, just how much of our regular season looks Coop will show. Because this is a fellow Eastern Conference contender. We're going to have to, at least, try to win one of those games, right? It'd be nice to go into the season knowing we can take care of business. This is a team that finished ahead of us last year, simply put. If we want to beat the Panthers down the line in this year, we're going to have to beat teams like this too. So it's pretty important. But the weakness for them is mostly in goal. Frederick Anderson, Pyotr Kyochev. Who's going to be the number one for them? Anderson's getting older. He has experience. He's shown he can do things. But, Kochechev, sorry. If I'm going to get that last name right. Kochetkov, sorry. Kochetkov, he's the young gun, right? If he can come up and he can claim that role, that's something that the Hurricanes are going to want. And so it's interesting to see just what happens there. If they decide to roll the hot hand and run with young European, or if they decide to go with the vet. It just depends on how the season starts, I'm guessing. But interestingly enough, we're going to pivot to our next what if. We love doing these. But, think about it. Bob in Bolts Blue. Okay, so Bobrovsky is going to be a free agent after this year. Is he going to want as much money as he made with the Panthers? He's not. He's almost certainly not going to get it because he's getting up there. He's already 37. He's going to be 37. So, he's not going to get that kind of money, but he could still get a solid amount. I can guarantee you some team, at least a couple teams, are going to offer him just a short-term number one role. So he can play there for a couple of years as the number one and then go elsewhere if he doesn't return to the Panthers, which should be surprising if he didn't because, he went through those ups and downs early in his time there, rose up, and he's now considered by some, including the Athletic, to be a near Hall of Fame lock at this point. So it's interesting because how would that Bob Vassie pairing look? It's back to the 1A, 1B kind of we talked about with Allen, but not really. It still wouldn't be that. Bob would have to play like 30 games because Vassie would need at least 50 to stay locked in, stay focused. It just wouldn't look. It'd probably be too pricey because you're already paying Vassie $9 million for the next 3 years. Would a high salary for Bob, say $5-6 million a year, while you're paying Vassie $9 million a year, really be a good idea? I don't think it would be. But cap space is rising. Who knows how it's going to be used by the front office? A Bob Vassie duo in the playoffs would probably be lights out. It would be very hard pressed for multiple teams for almost any team in the league to get past the pair of them and fully healthy in a playoff run. And that would allow so much other possibilities. Do I think it'll happen? Almost certainly not. But it is fun to think about because, it's if you're building up one area of the team, why not 2 elite goalies? But then you realize that's only one position. So it is probably not the best use of resources, which is why something like a Jake Allen would have been smarter because he's used to being a backup if needed. So, interestingly enough, we have a lot more coming the next couple of days. We're going to talk about the Bolts postseason chances. We're going to break down the Preds and the Panthers as well, more preseason opponents, and some other ways that these other younger Bolts players can step forward. One guy I'm really interested in particular to talk about is JJ Moser over the next few days and see just how well he can do and if he can actually get to maybe even that first line role to play alongside Hetty. Who knows? The kid's still really young. He's a year away from being a restricted free agent. I'm almost certain that we don't want to lose him, especially if he continues that growth he had from last year. But it's still 2026 is still quite a ways away. So we're going to break it down and talk about it a little more. But until tomorrow, this is Jordan with Lightning Latest. We'll see you guys later.